When Paul wrote his letter, we now call it the book of Titus, he had this really good, relevant, helpful instruction for Titus. Titus was a church leader, and here's the passage. Titus 3:9, Paul tells him, do not get involved in foolish discussions about spiritual pedigrees or in quarrels and fights about obedience to the Jewish laws. Paul told him, this is in the text, these things are useless and a waste of time. This is such great advice to churches, even still, because there are still plenty of issues that can get people angry and upset, and these are things that, frankly, they're not necessary to argue about. They don't need to cause serious trouble or divisions and hurtful discussions. And now I understand Paul's direction here is specifically to Titus regarding those particular issues within the church, the issues that he pointed out. I know that. I get that. However, I was reading this today, and I think this advice, just in a sort of a more general sense, this advice about avoiding, and here's the words that Paul used, foolish discussions. That advice, that's often going to be very wise in other places and other contexts as well. I mean, that's going to be good advice many times for issues and discussions outside of the church too. It really is. So here's a good question. When should you not engage in a discussion because it's clear that it's going to be a foolish discussion? I will not be able to provide all of the situations in which it would be wise to not get involved in a discussion. There's just too many possibilities. But one answer to that question would be this. When it's clear, or when it becomes clear that the person or persons in the discussion really do not want to listen to each other, they're really not, they don't want to give honest consideration to what's being said, that's a good discussion to avoid. Here, let me put that another way. Sometimes people in a discussion, they really have no intention of genuinely hearing what the other person is saying and trying to understand the point that the person is making. That what they're doing is they're waiting for the other person to finish talking. They're paying no attention to the other person. They're waiting for the person to finish talking so that they can then jump in and make their points. Can you see how there's no sense in having that kind of a quote-unquote discussion? Because that's not really a discussion in the first place. It's not a real discussion. A real discussion involves talking and listening. It involves communication, going back and forth, being delivered and being received. If the person or persons in the discussion don't want to do that, then to use Paul's words, we're just wasting time. And by the way, you guys know this, but this can happen online too. Yeah, in fact, it does happen online. So, just like Paul advised Titus to avoid the foolish discussions that were happening in some of the churches of that time, it would be wise for us to just avoid the foolish discussions.